There are moments in television history when the carefully constructed facade of normalcy collapses in an instant, revealing truths that nobody anticipated and everyone will remember. What transpired on the Family Feud stage in January 2025 would become one of those defining moments. Steve Harvey had guided thousands of families through the game show format over his years as host, witnessing joy, disappointment, and occasional drama. However, nothing in his extensive experience prepared him for what would unfold when a woman in the studio audience rose to her feet during a routine taping and spoke words that would bring everything to a complete halt. Sometimes truth demands to be heard, regardless of the setting or the consequences. On this particular afternoon, one woman's decision to stand up and speak would expose a web of deception, shatter a family's illusion of happiness, and demonstrate that secrets kept in darkness eventually find their way into the light. Before we explore this remarkable story that illustrates why integrity matters in every relationship, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these powerful Family Feud moments that remind us about the importance of honesty and the devastating cost of betrayal. The Richardson family from Dallas, Texas entered the Family Feud stage with the polished confidence of people accustomed to success and public visibility. Leading the family was David Richardson, a 49-year-old corporate attorney with silver-touched hair and the commanding presence of someone who spent his professional life in courtrooms. Beside him stood his wife of 26 years, Amanda Richardson, an elegant woman who worked as a non-profit director and carried herself with the grace and composure expected in Dallas social circles. Their family team included their adult daughter Victoria, a 24-year-old medical student, their son James, a 22-year-old recent college graduate, and David's younger brother Thomas, who had flown in from Houston to participate in the taping. Steve Harvey welcomed the Richardson family with his characteristic warmth, engaging in the pre-game banter that helped contestants relax and established rapport with the audience. David Richardson responded with easy charm, making jokes about his competitive nature and his determination to win the prize money for his wife's nonprofit organization. The interaction appeared natural and genuine, the kind of family dynamic that producers valued for creating engaging television content. What nobody in the studio could see was the tension sitting in row 7 of the audience, where a 34-year-old woman named Lauren Mitchell had taken her seat for what she believed would be a routine entertainment experience during her business trip to Los Angeles. The game commenced with standard Family Feud energy and enthusiasm. The Richardson family competed against the Torres family from Phoenix, and the early rounds demonstrated the Richardson family's quick thinking and strong teamwork. David proved to be an assertive team captain, strategizing with his family members and celebrating enthusiastically with each successful answer. Amanda smiled and participated, though observers paying close attention might have noticed a certain practiced quality to her expressions, as though she had learned over many years to maintain a specific public image regardless of her private feelings. As the game progressed through several rounds, Lauren Mitchell sat in the audience with growing agitation. She had purchased her ticket to this Family Feud taping through a standard promotional offer, having no knowledge that the Richardson family would be competing on this particular day. When she first saw David Richardson walk onto the stage, she experienced a moment of complete disorientation, unable to process the disconnect between the man she knew and the family context in which he now appeared. During a commercial break, Steve Harvey engaged with the studio audience as he typically did, making jokes and building energy for the next segment. His eyes scanned the crowd in the practiced way of an experienced performer, reading the room and gauging audience engagement. For just a moment, his gaze landed on Lauren Mitchell, and something in her expression gave him pause. She appeared distressed in a way that went beyond normal audience behavior, her face pale and her hands gripping the armrests of her seat with visible tension. Before Steve could process this observation further, the production crew signaled that the commercial break was ending and cameras would resume rolling momentarily. The game continued, and the Richardson family extended their lead, answering questions correctly and building toward a strong finish. David Richardson's confidence grew with each successful round, His courtroom honed charisma on full display as he played to both the studio audience and the cameras. Understanding the full magnitude of what was about to occur requires knowledge of the Richardson family history and the parallel relationship that David had been maintaining for the previous 18 months. David and Amanda Richardson had met 28 years earlier while both were in graduate school, David pursuing his law degree while Amanda completed her master's degree in nonprofit management. Their relationship developed during a period when both were focused on building their careers and establishing themselves professionally. The marriage that followed was built on mutual respect, shared social ambitions, and a compatible vision for the life they wanted to create together in Dallas. David's legal career flourished as he joined a prestigious corporate law firm and eventually made partner. His specialty in mergers and acquisitions brought substantial income and professional recognition. Amanda built her own successful career in the nonprofit sector, eventually becoming executive director of a well-regarded children's education foundation. They raised 2 accomplished children, maintained an active social life within Dallas's professional circles, and presented the image of a successful, stable family. Friends and colleagues often remarked on how well-suited they seemed, how they complemented each other's strengths, and supported each other's ambitions. However, beneath this polished exterior, the Richardson marriage had developed the kind of emotional distance that can occur when 2 people become so focused on maintaining appearances and achieving goals that they neglect the intimate connection that initially brought them together. David spent long hours at the firm, frequently traveling for depositions and client meetings. Amanda dedicated extensive time to her foundation work, often attending evening fundraisers and weekend events. They functioned as an effective partnership in managing their household and supporting their children's endeavors, but the deeper emotional and romantic connection had gradually eroded over years of prioritizing everything except their relationship. 18 months prior to the Family Feud appearance, David had met Lauren Mitchell at a legal conference in Chicago. She worked as a litigation consultant, providing expert analysis for complex corporate cases. Their initial conversation was professional, discussing aspects of a merger case that David was handling. The intellectual connection led to dinner, which led to drinks, which led to David making a choice that would ultimately destroy the carefully constructed life he had built. The affair that developed was not a brief indiscretion, but a sustained relationship that David actively maintained through regular travel, clandestine meetings, and an elaborate system of deception. David justified the affair through rationalizations common to people engaged in infidelity. He told himself that Amanda no longer understood him, that the passion had left their marriage years ago, that he deserved happiness and fulfillment beyond what his marriage provided. He compartmentalized his life with remarkable efficiency, keeping Lauren completely separate from his Dallas existence. She knew he was married but believed his assurances that the marriage was essentially over, that he was only maintaining it until their children finished college, that divorce was inevitable and simply a matter of timing. Lauren, for her part, allowed herself to believe these explanations because she had developed genuine feelings for David and wanted to trust that their relationship represented something real and meaningful rather than a destructive deception. The Family Feud appearance had been Amanda's idea, suggested 6 months earlier as a family activity that might bring them all together and create positive memories. David had agreed, seeing no risk in the plan. His affair with Lauren was conducted primarily in other cities during business travel. He had no reason to anticipate that their paths would intersect in a Family Feud studio in Los Angeles. Lauren Mitchell had come to Los Angeles for a work conference and decided to attend a Family Feud taping as entertainment during her free afternoon. She had no knowledge of David's family members, had never seen photographs of Amanda or the children, and had no reason to expect that David Richardson would be anything other than the single man in an unhappy marriage that he had portrayed himself to be. The game continued with the Richardson family maintaining their strong performance. They had won the main game against the Torres family and were now preparing for fast money, the final round that would determine whether they would win the $20,000 grand prize. In the audience, Lauren Mitchell was experiencing a profound psychological crisis as she processed the disconnect between what she was witnessing and what she had believed about David Richardson. The man on stage was not unhappily married and waiting for the right moment to leave. He was enthusiastically competing with a family that appeared close and connected. His wife was not the cold, distant figure he had described, but rather an elegant, composed woman who seemed genuinely invested in the family activity. Lauren watched as David hugged his adult children, as he put his arm around Amanda's shoulders during a celebration moment, as he spoke to Steve Harvey about how proud he was of his family. Every gesture, every word contradicted the narrative David had constructed for her over 18 months. The realization that she had been deceived, that she was not the other woman in a dying marriage, but rather the mistress destroying an intact family, created a combination of rage, humiliation, and moral horror that built inside her with increasing pressure. During the setup for Fast Money, as Steve was explaining the rules and selecting which family members would participate, Lauren made a decision that would change multiple lives in an instant. She stood up from her seat in row 7, and in the momentary quiet between Steve's sentences, she spoke in a voice loud enough to carry across the studio. "David Richardson is a liar and a cheater." The words cut through the studio atmosphere like a blade. Every head turned toward the sound. The cameras, which had been focused on the stage, swung toward the audience. Steve Harvey froze mid-sentence, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he tried to understand what was happening. On stage, David Richardson's face transformed from celebratory confidence to absolute horror as he recognized Lauren Mitchell standing in the audience. Amanda Richardson followed her husband's gaze to the woman in row 7, and something in her expression suggested that while she might not have known specifics, she was not entirely surprised that a moment like this had arrived. Steve Harvey, demonstrating the instinct and experience that had made him successful across multiple platforms, immediately signaled to the production crew to stop rolling cameras. However, Lauren was not finished speaking. "I have been in a relationship with him for 18 months, she continued, her voice shaking with emotion, but remaining clear and audible. "He told me he was getting divorced, that his marriage was over, that he was just waiting for the right time. But here he is with his perfect family, playing games on television like everything is fine." The studio erupted in gasps, murmurs, and shocked reactions. The Torres family, still standing at their podium, looked at each other in complete confusion. Audience members began talking among themselves, some pulling out phones despite studio policies against recording. Steve Harvey moved quickly to take control of a situation that had spiraled beyond anything in the standard game show format. "Everyone, please," he said, his voice carrying the authority that silenced the growing chaos. "We need to stop for a moment. This is clearly a private matter that needs to be addressed, but not like this, not in front of all these people and cameras." He turned to address the production crew directly. "Cut the cameras. Clear the studio. This family needs privacy." However, Amanda Richardson had other ideas about how this moment would proceed. She had stood perfectly still during Lauren's declaration, her composure maintained through years of practice in managing her public presentation. Now she stepped forward and addressed Steve directly. "Do not clear the studio. Do not turn off the cameras. If this woman has something to say about my husband, I want to hear it, and I want everyone to hear it." Steve Harvey faced an unprecedented decision as a game show host. He had a woman in the audience claiming an affair with a contestant, a wife demanding that the revelation continue publicly, children standing on stage being exposed to their father's betrayal, and a studio full of witnesses to what was becoming a devastating personal crisis broadcast as entertainment. His instinct was to protect the family, particularly the adult children who appeared stunned and confused, but Amanda's insistence that this continue publicly complicated the ethical calculation. "Mrs. Richardson," Steve said carefully, "I understand you want answers, but your children are standing right here. Maybe this conversation should happen privately." Amanda looked at her daughter Victoria and son James, both of whom stood frozen in shock. "My children are adults," she said firmly. "They deserve to know the truth about their father just as much as I do. We have all been living in his constructed reality. It is time for the actual reality to be revealed. She turned to face Lauren Mitchell directly. You said you have been in a relationship with my husband for 18 months. Tell me everything. Tell all of us everything. Lauren Mitchell, who had acted on impulse when she stood and spoke, now found herself in the position of providing detailed testimony about an affair in front of hundreds of people. She hesitated, the full weight of what she had initiated beginning to register. David Richardson finally found his voice, though it was noticeably diminished from the confident tone he had maintained throughout the game. Amanda, please, not here, not like this. Let me explain privately. You have had 18 months to explain privately. Amanda responded, her voice controlled but edged with fury. You made the choice to bring our family onto this stage. You made the choice to maintain a double life. This woman made the choice to stand up and speak. I am making the choice to hear what she has to say in front of everyone rather than listening to more of your carefully crafted lies in private. The confrontation between husband and wife held the studio in absolute silence. Steve Harvey, recognizing that he could not stop what was unfolding, made the decision to facilitate it as humanly as possible rather than abandon the family to navigate it alone. He had chairs brought onto the stage and invited Lauren Mitchell to come forward if she chose to do so. Lauren walked to the stage on unsteady legs, her earlier righteous anger giving way to a complex mix of emotions as she faced the full reality of the situation she had helped create. Standing before Amanda Richardson, she saw not a villain or an obstacle but a woman whose life she had disrupted, whose marriage she had participated in destroying. I am sorry. Lauren said, the words inadequate but genuine. I am so sorry. David told me his marriage was over, that you were staying together only for appearances until the children finished college. He said you barely spoke to each other, that you had separate lives. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Amanda's laugh was bitter and sharp. Separate lives. We have been married for 26 years. We raised 2 children together. We built careers, a home, a life in Dallas. Did we have problems? Yes, like any long-term marriage, but we were not over. I had no idea he was conducting an affair, which means our marriage was apparently alive enough that he needed to hide it from me. She turned to David, who had sunk into one of the chairs with his head in his hands. How did you manage it? The travel, the phone calls, the elaborate scheduling required to maintain a relationship with someone in another city, while maintaining the appearance of a normal life with your family. David looked up at his wife, and the facade of the confident attorney had completely crumbled, revealing a man who appeared much older and more tired than he had appeared at the start of the taping. It started at a conference in Chicago. Lauren was consulting on one of my cases. We had dinner, and it just happened. I told myself it did not mean anything, that it was a one-time mistake. But then I kept seeing her at other conferences, and it became more. I justified it by telling myself that our marriage had become more of a partnership than a romance, that I deserved to have both the stability of family and the excitement of a new relationship. You deserved. Amanda repeated, her voice heavy with contempt. You deserved to betray me, to lie to our children, to risk everything we built together because you felt entitled to excitement. She turned to address Steve Harvey and the studio audience. This is what affairs look like in real life, not some romantic narrative about star-crossed lovers. This is a middle-aged man who decided his marriage vows meant nothing when confronted with temptation. This is 18 months of lies, of looking me in the face every day and deceiving me. This is our children finding out that their father is not the man of integrity he pretended to be. Victoria, the daughter, finally spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. Dad, you made me believe that honesty and integrity were the most important values. You told me that reputation is built on character. You said that shortcuts and deception always catch up with you eventually. Were those all just words? Did you believe any of it, or were you just performing the role of an ethical person while doing the opposite? The question from his daughter appeared to impact David more deeply than anything else. He reached toward Victoria, but she stepped back, rejecting the gesture. Do not touch me. I do not know who you are anymore. James the son stood silent with tears streaming down his face, unable to articulate the betrayal and confusion he was experiencing. Steve Harvey moved to stand beside the young man, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. The gesture was wordless but communicated compassion and understanding for a young person processing devastating information about his father in the most public way imaginable. Lauren Mitchell, standing on the stage as the physical manifestation of David's betrayal, struggled with her own realization that she had been both victim and accomplice in the deception. "I believed him when he said the marriage was over," she said to Amanda. "But I should have verified, should have insisted on meeting you before getting involved. I convinced myself that believing him was enough because it was easier than confronting difficult questions. I am culpable in what happened to you and your family, and I am sorry." Amanda looked at Lauren with an expression that contained anger, but also a measure of recognition that both women had been manipulated by the same man, albeit in different ways. "You were not the one who made vows to me," Amanda said. "You were not the one who stood before our families and community and promised faithfulness. David is responsible for this betrayal, not you, but you participated in it, and you will have to live with that knowledge, just as I will have to live with the knowledge that my marriage was a lie." The aftermath of the revelation on the Family Feud stage created ripples that extended far beyond the immediate moment of exposure. The episode, when it eventually aired with extensive editing to protect the Richardson children while preserving the essential truth of what had occurred, sparked intense national conversation about infidelity, public accountability, and the role of television in exposing private betrayals. Steve Harvey addressed the incident extensively on his various platforms, using it as a teaching moment about integrity, marriage, and the consequences of deception. What happened on that Family Feud stage was unprecedented. Steve explained during a special episode of his talk show. A woman stood up in the audience and exposed an affair in the most public way possible. Some people criticized her for doing it, said she should have approached the situation differently. But here is what I saw. I saw a woman who had been lied to, who suddenly understood the full extent of the deception, and who refused to remain silent. Was it the best way to handle it? Maybe not. But it was honest, and sometimes honesty is messy and uncomfortable. Amanda Richardson filed for divorce within 1 week of the Family Feud incident. The proceedings were complicated by David's significant assets and income as a partner in a major law firm, but Amanda had consulted with her own attorney immediately after the taping and moved forward with strategic clarity. The public nature of the affair's exposure worked in her favor during settlement negotiations, as David recognized that fighting would only prolong public scrutiny and further damage his professional reputation. The impact on David Richardson's career was substantial and immediate. While the affair itself might have been handled discreetly within his firm, the public exposure on national television created complications that could not be ignored. Several clients expressed concern about being represented by someone whose judgment and integrity had been so publicly questioned. The firm's management committee, while not terminating David's partnership, made clear that his path to increased responsibility and leadership had been significantly compromised. The Richardson children processed their father's betrayal in different ways, both requiring extensive therapy to work through complex feelings of anger, confusion, and grief for the father they thought they knew. Victoria, the medical student, struggled with trust issues in her own relationships, finding it difficult to believe romantic partners after witnessing how completely her father had deceived her mother. James, the recent college graduate, experienced anger that manifested in broken communication with his father and a period of self-destructive behavior before committing to therapeutic work. Lauren Mitchell left her position as a litigation consultant and relocated to a different city, seeking to escape the notoriety that followed her after the Family Feud incident. The relationship with David ended immediately, both recognizing that what had been built on deception could not transform into something legitimate and healthy. Lauren eventually spoke publicly about her experience, not to justify her actions, but to help other people understand how easy it is to become complicit in someone else's lies when you want to believe their version of reality. 6 months after the devastating Family Feud revelation, Amanda agreed to an in-depth interview with Steve Harvey on his talk show. The transformation in her was remarkable. While the pain of betrayal remained visible, there was also strength, clarity, and a sense of liberation that had emerged from the end of living within David's constructed narrative. "People ask me how I am managing," Amanda said during the interview. "The honest answer is that some days are harder than others. 26 years of marriage do not end without grief, even when the marriage ended because of betrayal. But I am also experiencing a kind of freedom I had not realized I was missing. I no longer have to manage David's image or maintain the appearance of perfection. I can simply be myself." Steve asked her about the moment when Lauren Mitchell stood up in the audience, whether she had suspected the affair before that revelation. Amanda's response was thoughtful and introspective. "I think part of me knew something was wrong. David had become more distant, more secretive, more focused on his appearance and his phone. But I was busy with my own work, and we had fallen into a pattern of parallel lives that felt normal because it had developed gradually over years." When Lauren stood up and spoke, my first feeling was not actually surprise. It was relief that the vague suspicions and uncomfortable feelings finally had a concrete explanation. The interview included a segment where Amanda discussed the decision to insist that the revelation continue publicly rather than taking it private as Steve had suggested. "I made that choice in the moment, and I have thought about it extensively since then," she explained. "My children were hurt by having their father's betrayal exposed so publicly. That causes me pain, and I have apologized to them for not protecting them from that moment. But I also believe there was value in refusing to allow David to control the narrative, to manage the situation privately where he could craft explanations and minimize consequences. The public exposure meant accountability, and accountability matters." 1 year after the Family Feud incident, Amanda had established a new life with remarkable resilience. She had continued her work as executive director of the Children's Education Foundation, finding purpose and meaning in her professional contributions. She had sold the large home she had shared with David and purchased a smaller property that felt authentically hers rather than a monument to a marriage that no longer existed. She had developed a close friendship with Lauren Mitchell, recognizing that both women had been manipulated by David in different ways, and that directing anger at each other served no constructive purpose. The friendship was unusual and occasionally criticized by people who believed Amanda should maintain anger toward Lauren. But Amanda explained it as a choice rooted in understanding rather than condoning. "Lauren was lied to just as I was lied to," Amanda said in an interview. "David told her his marriage was over. He created a false reality for her just as he maintained a false reality for me. Hating her does not change what happened or help me move forward. Understanding her experience helps me process my own." David Richardson underwent significant personal and professional consequences in the year following the exposure. Beyond the impact on his legal career, he lost the respect of colleagues, friends, and community members who had known him as a person of integrity. The carefully constructed reputation he had built over decades was permanently damaged by the public revelation of his sustained deception. He engaged in therapy, working to understand the entitlement and compartmentalization that had enabled his affair. He made attempts to rebuild relationships with his children through family counseling sessions, though the process was difficult and progress was slow. 3 years after the Family Feud revelation, Amanda had become an advocate for people dealing with the aftermath of infidelity, speaking at conferences and writing articles about betrayal, recovery, and the importance of authenticity in relationships. She emphasized that her experience, while dramatic in how it unfolded, was representative of what many people experienced when discovering a partner's affair. The shock, the self-doubt, the grief, and the difficult process of rebuilding were universal even when the circumstances of discovery differed. Amanda had also begun a new relationship with a colleague in the nonprofit sector, approaching it with wisdom gained through painful experience. She set clear expectations about honesty and communication from the beginning, and she trusted her instincts in ways she had learned to ignore during her marriage to David. The Richardson children had reached different points in their healing journey. Victoria had completed medical school and was in her residency, having worked through her trust issues sufficiently to enter into a committed relationship built on transparency and communication. James had found stability through therapy and had re-established limited contact with his father, though the relationship remained cautious and conditional. Both children credited their mother's strength and honesty in the aftermath of the betrayal as models for how to navigate difficult situations with integrity. Lauren Mitchell had rebuilt her career in a different field and had become involved in organizations that helped people recognize and exit unhealthy relationships. She spoke openly about her experience as the other woman, not to excuse her choices but to help people understand how easy it is to believe lies when someone presents them convincingly and you want to believe. 5 years after that moment when she stood up in the Family Feud audience and spoke truth that shattered multiple lives, Lauren reflected on the decision in an interview. "I acted impulsively when I stood up and spoke," she said. "I was angry and hurt and feeling betrayed by David's deception. I did not think about the consequences for his wife or his children. Looking back, I wish I had handled it differently, perhaps contacted Amanda privately rather than making such a public declaration. But I also believe that sometimes truth needs to be spoken even when the method of speaking it is imperfect." David had been lying to everyone for 18 months. Someone needed to stop the deception, and in that moment, I was the one who did it. Steve Harvey continued to reference the Richardson family incident for years afterward as an example of how carefully constructed lies can collapse in an instant when confronted with truth. He used it to counsel couples about the importance of addressing problems in marriage before they create the kind of emotional distance that makes affairs seem like reasonable solutions. David Richardson had everything, Steve said in one talk show segment. Successful career, beautiful family, respect in his community. He destroyed all of it because he felt entitled to excitement and validation from a new relationship. That is not a marriage problem. That is a character problem. Marriage requires work, requires communication, requires choosing your partner even when temptation appears. David chose deception instead, and he lost everything that actually mattered. 10 years after the Family Feud revelation, the Richardson family story continued to serve as a cultural reference point for discussions about infidelity and public accountability. Amanda had written a book titled, After the Affair: Rebuilding Identity Beyond Betrayal, which became a resource for people navigating the aftermath of discovering a partner's infidelity. The book addressed not just the practical aspects of divorce and separation, but the deeper psychological work of rebuilding self-trust and identity after a fundamental betrayal. In the book's final chapter, Amanda reflected on the moment when Lauren Mitchell stood up in the Family Feud audience. "That moment changed my life," she wrote. "It was devastating and humiliating and painful beyond anything I had previously experienced, but it also ended my participation in David's deception. I had been living in a false reality that he had constructed, accepting his explanations and dismissing my own instincts." When Lauren spoke, the false reality shattered, and while the truth was terrible, it was at least real. You cannot heal from something you are still denying exists. Lauren gave me truth, however imperfectly delivered, and truth was what I needed to begin rebuilding my life. The story of the Richardson family serves as a powerful reminder that deception carries consequences that extend far beyond the immediate relationship, that affairs destroy not just marriages but families and reputations, and that the truth will eventually emerge regardless of how carefully lies are constructed and maintained. It also demonstrates that victims of betrayal can rebuild their lives with strength and dignity, that healing is possible even after profound hurt, and that choosing truth over comfortable deception ultimately serves everyone better, even when truth arrives in unexpected and uncomfortable ways. If this story has impacted you, or reminded you of the critical importance of honesty, integrity, and accountability in all relationships, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful Family Feud moments and inspiring stories of truth, resilience, and the courage to speak up when confronted with deception and betrayal.